Riverside Salem UCC Church umbrella that was started as part of Dr. King's Clergy and Laity Concerned.
You ready to go on Facebook?
Yep.
Because they're ready if you're ready.
Okay. We're ready, right?
Okay.
Oh, and then we'll be taping for just under an hour.
Okay.
All right, step one is for you to flip the silver switch. Is the light on?
Yes, it is.
Okay, put the clapper in front of your face, and when you hit the clapper, you are on the air.
Welcome to Talking Peace with the Interfaith Peace Network. It's being recorded here at Think Twice Radio in the home of the future, thanks to our great producer, Richard Wicca. Thanks, Richard. So, which Richard? You can see Richard at the top of the screen there. So if you're watching, not listening. So anyway, we're happy. We're going to be having plenty to listen to, and I'm eager to be listening. I'm your host, Vicki Ross, working both, as the Human Rights and Peace Education Chair of the Western New York Peace Center, as well as a consultant for the Interfaith Peace Network that it's operating this part of the show. And we're very excited that we have Emily Rubino with us tonight. Hi, Emily. Hi. So Emily is the
Hi, Vicki.
new. Yeah, thanks for coming on. I just want to tell people who are listening that you're the new executive director. Still pretty new. How many months is it now?
I started in March, so however many months between.
Yeah,
now we're in September, so
every day a week goes by, and every month another year goes by is the way I feel about it. But anyway,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So 6 months of being the executive director. Besides the fact that you were the policy analyst before, and done all kinds of things with PeaceAction New York State. So it's very exciting to have you on. Thanks, Emily. Thanks for coming on. So we'll
Thanks
talk.
for having me, Vicki.
Oh, I've been trying to get you on the show for a while. That's what I'd have to say.
I know.
There's that combination of, one, you're very busy. Two, we're usually, depending on when we're taping. And three, I think you actually know how to set some boundaries, which is so desperately needed in a role like what you have, with all the, herding of cats and the people who are working night and day, or the people who are working at night and not in the day, and so all the other, so you do a lot of juggling. So before we really start talking about the issues and the work, I'd love it if we could talk a little bit about the values that we bring into the Zoom room, the room, the discussion, and that we're talking about in Talking Peace and in PeaceAction New York State. So what are the values that you really want us to focus on when you think about PeaceAction New York State?
I mean, I think the big one is obviously like anti-war, anti-militarist. Mm-hmm. Also, at our founding and core is anti-nuclear. Mm-hmm. So that's always there. And I think as we continue to see the connections between our issues and kind of look further at those roots behind everything, I hope we can focus a little bit also on like anti-imperialism and all of that.
That would be so important. I feel like it's so critical, and so often I feel like everything is so connected, so that the compassion that's needed, and I want to say especially for the anti-war work, that anti-war work, it's remote enough that unless there's a reason that it's brought more concretely into your life, if you have, family member in the military, or a family member who lives overseas, or if you're originally from somewhere else or something, there are things that can make it more real to you, more pressing to you. But very often it really has to be just that compassion for the people that you don't know, people that, just seeing what's happening. But it's a more remote problem a lot of times. And so it doesn't prick people the way the injustices that are right in front of us do, or that even affect us more directly. So I feel like.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think that, unless you kind of see those direct links, you're not really talking, even when we're not, right? Like, over half of our discretionary budget is going to our military. So at a time when everyone is asking, how are you going to pay for that? The money's there. The money's right there. And there's always more of it when we claim the Pentagon needs it or it's for so-called security concerns. So it all really is tied, not just in the money, but I think really also in like the root causes and the values and colonialism and imperialism and racism. And yeah, like this is what we're exacting all over the globe. So the ties are there, but we're not talking about it as much as we definitely could.
Well, you're right about that too, as a value that well, really nonviolence, the value of nonviolence, and so we could look at that in the most general or the most particular, but not killing. We could even go into not hating or blaming, but let's just start with the not killing. We could start with that.
Yeah.
That would be a good part of it, and that's where it's very related to so many of the things that we're fighting for and with in this country. And also, as you said, it is of course tied in terms of use of resources, or what are our priorities, right? What do we want to use money for first? So that's another values, like what's the bigger value, taking care of people or killing people that you're afraid of? Which do we value more? I think it's pretty much of a slam dunk to me, but anyway.
Yeah.
So those values. So we start with those values, and so why don't we talk a little bit about PeaceAction New York State, how it started, how even also how you found your way here, and what's your experience of PeaceAction New York State?
Yeah, great. There's a lot there.
Right.
Obviously, PeaceAction started way before I was ever born. It started as the merging of two anti-nuclear organizations during the Cold War. So it was the movement for a sane nuclear policy, and the freeze movement, which was kind of like freeze for freeze. We'll stop developing and testing if you stop developing and testing.
Right.
So sane and freeze came together into sane freeze, and then sane freeze became PeaceAction nationally. Over 60 years ago. Wow. And then there are different affiliates. Yeah, there are different affiliates across the country. We're the affiliate in New York.
Right.
So that's kind of how we began. And I know there was another really big kind of resurgence after the Cold War, leading up to the Iraq War in 2002. And since then, we've kind of expanded from being just anti-nuclear to really focusing more on issues of war and foreign policy and peace. So that's kind of how PeaceAction started, and PeaceAction New York State. I'm sure Sally Jones a more detailed history there, but that's kind of my understanding of how PeaceAction came to be. And then yeah, I'll pause because I think I'm freezing, but I can jump into we can fast forward to how I got involved once I'm caught up.
I wanted to ask one more thing so it was 60 years ago, so that surprises me. I should have known that, but I didn't. And then, so when did PeaceAction New York State start? Was that pretty soon after, would you say? Or not so much?
I'm not sure exactly when PeaceAction New York State became its own official separate entity. I think it was after the fact, because I think nationally there were just, different regions doing things. I don't think we were as independent as we are now as PeaceAction New York State.
Right.
But I would say if it wasn't specifically during that era, it would have been. Honestly, I don't know. I think we should ask Sally.
Well, that's an interesting question. So yeah, we can people who are fact checkers. You can fact check it for us and let us know, or we'll do it after the show. So that'll
Yeah.
be an interesting thing. And then it'll be the first question when we do our annual meeting. Who knows?
Yes.
Who does anybody know?
Who's the historian? Yeah.
Right. Somebody might know. But anyway, I don't
I'm
know.
sure someone does. Yeah.
What's interesting to me, and part of the reason I'm just curious was the reason I asked, but also the Western New York Peace Center started in 1967. So I'm just thinking, that era, as people have said, the era of the 60s, a lot happened. A lot of things happened that were, we're still, well, what do I want to say, reaping the benefits of, still in the throes of, still working, pushing forward on, but a lot of those things really people started to understand things differently in the 60s, and including especially U.S. imperialism. And I was so glad you brought that up in with the values, because it is so much bigger than just the wars. It's it's the corporations, it's the use of resources, it's the as Agnes, our friend Agnes Williams Seneca, that you may or may not have heard of or met. She's always talking about, the development of the first and second worlds is really dependent on the underdevelopment of the third and fourth worlds, right? So, the cash crops and, the resources being gotten for a song and, all of that. So the imperialism is definitely a big part of it. And then there is the patriarchy that's in there, I think, because it's in there especially with the might is right, because that's all about might is right too, whether it's for the corporations or the nation states. So anyway, so those are some things that can get worked on directly or indirectly, because they do, they all affect all that war making. But anyway, so now how did you find your way to New York, to PANYS, PeaceAction New York State?
So I found my way over to PeaceAction New York State in 2016. Like 5 years ago, coming up.
Right.
But going into college, or I guess growing up, like I wanted to do something to help people, right? Like whatever that was.
Right.
I wanted to do what I could to help people. In high school and younger, I was really into kind of directly volunteering at places, food kitchens, things like that. And I also grew up like going back and forth to Thailand. My mom's family is from Thailand. So I kind of liked this whole like having a larger world view. I saw that conditions were different there. And I wanted to do something about it. So I went into college thinking I wanted to go into humanitarian work. I majored in international humanitarian affairs. I thought that that's kind of the way I wanted to help. And throughout college, as I got more involved in kind of domestic social justice stuff, a lot of like activism on campus, learned about the 2 feet of social action.
The 2 feet of social action?
I kind of leaned more. Yes.
You kind of leaned more in what way?
I kind of leaned more into wanting to do less of the direct stuff and wanting to address the root causes of things, of wanting to kind of dig a little deeper to stop the problem before it happened, kind of.
Right.
So that's when I kind of started getting a more systemic overview of things, learning more about the deep, history and construction of race and racism and all other forms of injustice. And around that time, I also got ready to go on a human rights-based study abroad trip. So that trip started in New York. I was already in New York. I went to Fordham University. So it started in New York, and then it was a month in Nepal, a month in Jordan, and a month in Chile to talk about like different human rights issues in each place. And though each place was very different, it was also like everywhere we went, the U.S. had messed something up in some way. right? Like everywhere we went, something was wrong. Somehow it was because of the US or exacerbated by the US involvement. And that's something, I was aware of before, but I think seeing it firsthand everywhere we went, whether that's from us not giving enough money to like international aid or us causing there to be refugees that had to flee their homes, or overthrowing governments, just directly overthrowing governments, like we had a really negative impact. So when I came back from that, I no longer wanted to go elsewhere and do humanitarian work. I felt like my time and effort and resources were better spent staying in the US, trying to do something on our end as a US citizen on US foreign policy to be like, this is being done. And like, that's not okay. Right. So that's kind of how I came to really wanting to do this kind of work. And really wonderful timing. I got an email from Kate Alexander, who was my old boss at PeaceAction. At the time, she was running the student program. And it was an email about starting a student chapter at Fordham. She had been doing outreach to a lot of universities. And I saw this email, and that's when I first heard of PeaceAction New York State. But I only had one semester left before I was going to graduate college. So I didn't have enough time to build a campus chapter. And instead I reached out to Kate and ended up interning in the office that summer, or no, that spring semester, no, fall semester. I graduated a semester early. Time is not real. Right. It's not. I'm starting to lose track. But
no. Don't get me started. We'll go off that way.
Yeah, that's a whole separate combo.
Yes.
But yeah, basically Kate hired me to work as an intern in the office. She was starting grad school that semester and wanted a little bit more help. And that's kind of how I jumped in. Now we're all virtual, but back in the day we had a physical office, and I always joked that I just never gave the keys back. Because I stuck around after I graduated, after I'd interned. I kept in touch with Kate, I kept in touch with the office, and eventually when there was a job opening, I was hired to kind of manage the student program, and since then have kind of stuck around, continue to build relationships, been in a very supportive environment, gotten to meet wonderful people like Vicki, and Jim and Sally and Arnie and everyone who I'm sure I'm forgetting to name right now. But yeah, they were excited to see a younger person in the network who wanted to stay involved, who had new ideas, and wanted to bring a fresh energy. So that is what I've tried to do. And now I don't feel quite as young as I was when I started.
Every day, right?
It's been,
I'm sure that's true.
It's been a long 5 years to me, but it's very humbling because I think 5 years is a long time. And then I'll meet, folks who have been involved in this work for longer than I've been alive. So there's so much experience and knowledge out there. And this really, I think, is like lifelong work that people are doing. So 5 years feels, to me, it's been pretty much my whole life since I've graduated school. So that's how I ended up here.
Right. Well, I just love thinking about when we had a roast of when we had the roast of you, and Arnie Maitland, who is in Rochester, said, "Oh, well, I'm so surprised that Emily got to be the executive director because of all the things that Emily doesn't know. Emily doesn't know that when you're an intern, you're supposed to just go do your internship and then never hear from them again, and that you just stayed. Well, that is really, it is so telling, because that is really what the work takes, is that you just want to keep doing it, is that you feel that compelled to do it, and that wanting to help others, which is the activism, as Dr. King said, and so many people have said, is really caused by that deep love. When you really care about what's happening to other people, those are the things that cause a person to spend that kind of effort, to have that kind of energy for the work the way you do. And I want to say the other thing, it's not just that you are, have young energy and, mix it up a little bit, but also that you have a great skills at, just getting to the heart of the problem, saying what needs to be said, having some real, both analytical skills and that people awareness piece. I'm a social worker, so I come at it from that, but I also wanted to be do humanitarian. I wanted to do project work. I thought I wanted to save. We used to call it save starving babies in somewhere, when I was studying international economic development. So but there's a lot of different ways of doing it, and I think so many of us come to this that you came to of just, especially if you're an American citizen, to be in the belly of the beast and do that work. I know when the war against Iraq was started, that I thought of going over as a human shield, and then I thought, well, are we going to be a human shield or are we going to be a human target? I wasn't sure. I was thinking that George Bush might get a plane and say, yeah, you can all just go over, that he would love nothing better than to send all the activists over there. And so I decided that instead I would just put all my every waking minute that I wasn't working as a clinical social worker, actually mobile therapist, that I would do, I would spend it on that work that you're talking about, being in the belly of the beast, calling it what it is, helping people to understand, and to understand how it's all connected in that way that we talked about. Whether it's because of the principles, the resources, there's all kinds of ways. Whether it's about who we're actually doing, making war on, that's very racially. We're not making war on the Brits, or the Germans even, right? Or, people in Europe. But anyway, so that is very interesting. I have to tell you that Thailand is one of the places I wanted to go. And if I had added one more country in my bucket trip on that trip, it would have been Thailand. It would have definitely,
Wow.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
such a wonderful place to see and be. And there is so much to learn. I'm so glad they had that program. It sounds wonderful. And it shows just how much it developed your maturity and your broad view of just the different ways that militarism and the United States appears in different places.
Yeah, I do think I have mixed feelings about the program looking back. I think a lot of what I got out of it had to do more with like my specific professor that I had, and more of like the specific people that were on the trip and who we met with, and less to do with the structure itself.
Sure.
I think that there were really big flaws in the program, to be honest.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it definitely was extremely transformative.
Right.
But yeah, there were, I think, a lot of times where people treated us a certain way or would share information or revisit trauma with us because they thought as US students studying human rights, we would be able to help them specifically right then and there. And like, obviously we didn't have the ability to do that.
Right. Well, that would be difficult for everyone, for sure.
Directly fault the program for that, but I felt like they were kind of sharing with us or opening up under false pretenses for the sake of our learning, which just didn't feel fair.
Right.
Right. Yeah. But I think because of I think some of that has fed into me wanting to do this work, and that I think we can have compassion for people we've never met, but I think that when we meet people, we kind of feel a certain duty and obligation to them to do what we can. And I couldn't do anything then, right? Like I didn't have, I was not an immigration lawyer. I had no ability to influence visas. So yeah, I think that part of the trip was very hard because I feel like we were treated a certain way because of what they thought we would be able to do, and we weren't able to do that.
Right.
So that has really stuck with me. And I think, I think the trip, I went on it kind of wanting, I enjoyed travel. I like seeing places. And I think after that, it's kind of like, if I'm going to travel because I'm on vacation and I want to go on vacation, or because I was invited by someone there and we're building actual solidarity with each other, and not just, showing up somewhere uninvited trying to help, because that's not helping anyone. And that's,
No, right.
That's what the US, that's like this colonizer mindset we've had forever. So definitely trying to challenge that.
Right, right. Well, that's where people really need to have some insight on what is going to help. And part of it is just about honesty. So if truth, I think about principles so often. So, just today, I was talking about truth and love. And truth being the truth of what the program is, the truth of what you can and can't do. If that would be right out there in front, then that wouldn't, that makes it a very different experience for you and for them, and so that would be really important to make that a part of the way the program is set up. So yeah, that is very, very big. And you're right too. It's so true that we learn so much from, people, and there's nothing like, some of our professors that make really lifelong impressions on and help formulate our thinking and our our knowledge of the world and of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So so maybe this is a good way to sort of shift gears into some of the campaigns that we're working on. Some of the ones, let's say, that you're most excited about right now, because it's really a dizzying amount of things going on right now. And one of the things that we've talked about, and I know you struggle with it, and I think we all struggle with it, is it's just so hard to even know how much energy to put on which thing, because there's just so many, pressing needs. So what's one of the programs that if you think of like what's your most pressing campaign that you're working on right now?
I mean, it's so hard to prioritize.
Okay. Well, let's say a few. We'll talk about a few. So
we could talk about a few.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, right now it's, in terms of federal kind of legislation stuff, we're in appropriation season.
Right.
So as we start to look at the National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA, now is the time to call for cuts on that. Barbara Lee has been leading that charge, as she is many other very important charges, for a long time. She and Mark Pocan chair a defense spending reduction caucus. So that's something we could ask our reps to join. She also has a bill, HRES 476, that proposes $350 billion in cuts to the Pentagon budget. But cutting money to our overseas bases, some of these ridiculous weapons we don't need,
right,
that kind of thing. We can be cutting that money. So that's military spending. Locally in New York City, we have the Move the Money NYC campaign. I'm not involved in that as our board chair Sally Jones, but hearings on the money going to the federal budget that is being spent on defense stuff that could be better spent in New York City.
Right.
Perhaps fixing the subways, or having better infrastructure. I mean, we just saw what the storm did last week. So yeah, that's a really wonderful local bill, and hopefully we'll see other replica efforts in other city councils or local municipalities. We've been trying to stop the U.S. involvement in Yemen for years.
Right.
I think for as long as I've been involved with PeaceAction.
Right.
Right now, there's a really big push to get a Yemen War Powers resolution introduced. At the beginning of this year, President Biden said that he would stop U.S. offensive support for the war in Yemen. But we're trying to figure out what that means strategically. Are we still sharing information? Are we, what are we still doing? So
It's been,
Exactly.
yeah, nothing. It's been nothing. It's been
It
a
means
bunch of
nothing.
lip service. Yeah, we're
Exactly.
gonna stop pretty soon. It's just one more fix.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, you're
So,
making me think of.
about every 75 seconds. Sorry.
Go on.
Like about every 75 seconds, a child in Yemen dies. And there's a website called every75seconds.org that we've co-sponsored and other groups have contributed to, including Action Corps, who's really been helping lead the charge on this. And yeah, like we really need to see a real material strategic end to our involvement, not just words that say we're going to stop.
Right.
So we're hoping reintroducing a war powers resolution would give us more of a concrete end as opposed to, oh yeah, like, it's fine, we'll do it later. We want some concrete answers, and the people of Yemen deserve a concrete end to this war. And if we fully stopped involvement, I think the war would really have to come to an end. So
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's the war profiteers. The munitions industry in this country that is just off the hook, and so they don't love. I wonder if there's anybody they love more than Mohammed bin Salman. So there's all of that going on. I know we're also very involved with that, both the Western New York Peace Center and the Interfaith Peace Network. And I love that, first of all, that was the first thing you went to was the Pentagon budget and all the money that goes into militarism, because to me that's, and the Move the Money campaign as well, which we're working on something like that right now, actually, even as we speak, in Buffalo. So we'll see how far we get with that. We have the fast track and the slower track, and we'll see which one ends up being more helpful, but at least we're moving on it. But meanwhile, it's always a good time to remind our Congress people who are part of that whole unholy alliance, because a lot of them get a lot of money. There's a lot of lobbying by Raytheon and Boeing and all these General Dynamics, General Electric, isn't it too? Is it? Or is that?
I don't think General
not
Electric.
General Electric. Not General Electric.
I think they might just be
General
our power,
Dynamics.
but definitely
Right.
General Dynamics.
But
yeah.
certainly General Dynamics. What's one of the other biggest ones? So those are among the top 3 or 4. Those manufacturers: Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Martin, and General Dynamics would be very big in all of those.
Lockheed Martin.
Right, Lockheed Martin, definitely. Right. So, and it's a way of sort of making it so plain how it is all connected, because all that money, even Eisenhower said it, is every aircraft carrier is the theft from every hungry family, et cetera. That he made it very plain, just how much it's all connected, because those resources,
Exactly.
it's the opportunity cost. Back to economics. The opportunity cost of the things that you don't are the things that you don't do, or the money you didn't spend because you did something else. So we have spent so much money. I mean, how many trillion was it in Afghanistan on something that we didn't? Did we help them at all? I mean, there may have been some help. If there was a little bit of help in some small areas, it was also negated by all the bombing and terror and terrorizing that went on that whole time. The drone program that had really the whole country as under siege. Really, people were afraid to turn on the lights. It makes me think of that. The other thing that I've been so busy with the Afghan, trying to help some of the Afghan youth get out of there, that we've been working with. So it's just so important to stop stop the military industrial complex, really. And so
Yeah.
sometimes I like to call it Fear Inc. So that's the military industrial congressional contractors and the whole and the prison industrial. So all of the efforts to control, intimidate, incarcerate, and even kill. And they get all the money. They get the boatloads full of money, no questions asked. Lose a few billion, nobody cares, But then the schools need to have a bake sale, So what is wrong
Yeah.
with that
Or you have
picture?
teachers buying their own school.
Right. So true. Yep, the teachers definitely, and and the needs, the human needs. So even in terms of other countries, back to we were talking about how our relationship with other countries, if we spent a fraction of the same amount on aid for other countries rather than on bullying and terrorizing other countries or doing regime change in other countries, what a different world it would be. Oh my God, we just have so much to do there.
Yeah. Or we'll do both at once. Like in Yemen, we were giving aid, but we were also bombing them.
Right.
And we were spending, exorbitantly more on the bombing. So what is the point? Like, we're kind of trying to say we're the good guys because we're giving them aid without leaving the part out where the reason they need the aid is because of us in the first place.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. And I also wonder how much of it gets to them, because not just about the corruption, but also just the blockade. So that they must have to fly it in or something, because the blockade is not allowing it in by ship.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they're not getting fuel. I mean, just everything is falling apart there and has been for so long. It is just a terrible situation. So Yemen, and then another again, very, very hard and very touchy situation in Palestine. So in Gaza and the
Absolutely.
The people are suffering very mightily, and I know, there's just been, it's very controversial, and yet it is very, very much needed. And the amount of aid and the amount of assistance that we've given, and different rules for Israel than for anyone else. I think that's one of the things. I mean, it sort of takes me back to the nuclear, and actually you were saying, the roots in the nuclear, is that the nuclear weapons just show just how much back to the rule of law and equality for people, if we talk about that, and for countries, just how much that's a bunch of garbage. That's nothing like that going on when, the rest of the countries are held hostage by a handful, or two handfuls, or almost two handfuls, of countries with nuclear weapons. And the rules are different for those countries. But nobody else can get them. But we can go on and have a whole new generation of nuclear weapons and feel that that's, no problem. So that's another, that is another area, is the nuclear, and I know that we've been talking about that, especially back to the money, because they want to do a whole new generation of nuclear weapons. And that's going to be very expensive.
Yes. Yeah. All of these plans to modernize are just absurd. And I don't know how we can say in good faith that we're never going to use these weapons again, that they're just for defense, which is not a real thing. But how could we even say that when we're like, oh, like we need to upgrade them so that they're more usable, though?
Right.
Like we should be working on disbanding these weapons, not upgrading them. And when we talk about these like low yield weapons today, the low yield weapons we're talking about are just as, if not more powerful than the nuclear weapons we used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So the ones that we have that are not low yield I can't even fathom the type of destruction they would cause. And we have like, I think still like maybe 1,800 of them on hair trigger alert that like the president, whoever the president may be, can launch at a moment's notice. Like no one should have that kind of power.
No, no one should.
No.
Absolutely crazy. And then the other thing is that, of course, now nuclear weapons, thank you. Well, I won't say thank you, Lord. I guess well, we could say thank you, Lord, but I want to thank the 53 countries that have signed that, so that the treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons has been signed into law internationally.
Mm-hmm.
So even though the U.S. hasn't signed it, and of course none of the nuclear powers have signed it because they think it's just fine that they should have, as Claire Grady, one of the Kings Bay Plowshares, says, you know, a gun to the head of the rest of the world is no problem for us, you know. So we don't care if it's illegal. Well, we do care if it is illegal. And I think what we need to do is find out, you know, some of the places where it would be the best place to go with our hazmat suits and make a citizen's arrest. You know, that's what I've been thinking about doing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
or just we have to, you know, are there some, is there some, we were just talking about the legislative season and the budgeting. Is there any initiative that's talking specifically about the nuclear weapons and the new generation, stopping all of that, or not? Do you know?
Yes, there's a slew of bills.
Really?
There's a few. I'm not sure, you know, about any specific amendments to the NDAA that might be included or not at this point.
Right.
But there's on ICBM saying
right.
that we should
Right.
not modernize one of our weapons and redirect those savings into a universal coronavirus vaccine.
Right.
There's the SLC-M Band Act, or the Sea-Launched Cruise Missile Ban Act, to prevent funding and development for the deployment of nuclear-armed sea-launched cruise missile, which seems like a no-brainer to me, but
Right.
you know, these are like, why is this what we would spend money on? Then there's also the kind of namesake legislation that we have, the SANE Act, or the Smarter Approaches to Nuclear Expenditures Act, that would reduce nuclear weapons spending. And then there's also a few bills related to developing or establishing a no first use policy for the U.S.
Right.
I know there's a slew of opinions on whether or not this is a good step to be taking or not, but I think anything that's going to from this brink of nuclear war is important. So establishing an official no first use policy that we will not be the first to launch a nuclear weapon, I think is an important thing. And it's something that Biden has signaled support for. So we're hoping that as small of a step as it may seem, is something that we can kind of push through. You'd think that also be a no-brainer, but
You would think so. And in fact, I have been shocked where a certain congressperson who shall not be named filled out their form, and they said that they were not in favor of a no first use policy. And I felt like, what? You know, I mean, to me, it is only obvious that when everyone agrees that a nuclear war cannot be won. Well, first of all, I think of Women in Black, where there's a sign that says all wars are lost. Well, yes. Or even, I love this, you must have seen this bumper sticker, there is no violent solution. I love that. Isn't that great? That's
just true, yeah.
Right, and I think that is just true. But even for the people who don't think that is true, we do know that we don't want a nuclear war. I mean, I hope we would know that. I mean, I don't know how much of a professor you have to be to see the sense in that. It's like, you know, don't commit suicide. Don't commit omnicide. I mean, back to that, actually, Kings Bay Plowshares again called it omnicide. It's the logical, it will just kill off everything. But anyway, there are so many, so we were only just scratched the surface on different campaigns, and we didn't even talk yet about all the student chapters, which there are how many student chapters? Yeah.
There's just under 20 at the beginning of this semester. So there's
Right.
always a drop off between
Sure.
this fall. We also just hired a new student and campaigns coordinator that will be
good.
helping manage that program. Her name's Margaret, so maybe she'll come on next. But she's great.
Sure.
She actually just started last week, and we just started our check-in calls this week. But yeah, 18 student chapters across the state at the beginning of this fall semester.
Great. Oh, good. Well, that is one of the things we know is back to, it's not only, we need all of us. We can't just stick it on the young people, but we do need young people. And a lot of times the colleges and universities where people are there thinking, and people still have the courage to think, things can be different and that they need to. And, in so many ways, I feel like we just, there's no more time to lose on so many of our issues, and including, when we look at climate catastrophe, so then resource wars, or also the polluting nature of the wars. So all of that back to all of it being connected. I wanted to, first of all, direct people to the PeaceAction New York State website, which is so good, and talk about the annual meeting a little bit, too. So, first of all, the website, it's PANYS, PANYS, .org, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people can get all kinds of information on there. I know there's lots of different information about both the campaigns, different events, just a huge amount of information, and also about the different affiliates, which the Western New York Peace Center is one. The Interfaith Peace Network is quite, closely aligned, mostly through our parent that I was just talking about, Riverside Salem, which was the original parent of the Western New York Peace Center, and which also has a seat on the board still. And that is the umbrella organization for the Interfaith Peace Network as well. But anyway, it's still all the same work that, and it's about, just, peace through justice at home and abroad is the mission statement of the Western New York Peace Center, and creating a culture of peace is what we're trying to do at the Interfaith Peace Network. And I think it's so that the contribution of PANYS to that is just so extreme, because there are just all kinds of opportunities to learn, to connect, to collaborate, to make some of these things happen, or make them not happen, as the case may be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely a lot that we're trying to prevent.
Right. There's a lot that we're trying to prevent. And people have just sort of accepted it. They just think it's too hard to change. But it's too hard not to change. Because if we don't change it, we're going to keep going in this wrong direction. And we're going to keep going. Everything tells us, I want to say indigenous wisdom, or, that there are two paths. It makes me think of, and I've heard indigenous people say this, there's two paths. And I think it was Winona LaDuke was just saying it, but there's one path where it's all burnt out and, desolate. And then there's another path of green, peaceful, doing things differently. And to me, it's the fork in the road. So it's violence or nonviolence. So I feel like that, that's where the courage to believe that we can do things differently and then try new things becomes so crucial. And making decisions to do things in a radically different way.
Yeah. And I think we're reaching a point where we really don't have a choice. Like, the choice is life or death at this point, and it has been for a while. Where if we don't dare to imagine a different future, if we don't dare to do things differently, or in a lot of ways revert back to trust indigenous knowledge and revert back to a world before we had rampant capitalism and exploitation of all of our resources, there's going to be nothing left. Like, we keep saying that the climate plans we're proposing are like, everyone's like, oh, they're too expensive. But how expensive is the damage from these once in a lifetime that I see every few months, these once in a lifetime climate disasters? Like, what do you think is more expensive?
Right.
Moving us all to Mars, or, investing time and energy in saving our planet?
I don't want to go. No, people don't want to go. I mean, it's such a crazy thing. And the amount of resources and things, not like, I mean, that's not the worst use of our resources. We were just talking about some of the worst uses of our resources. But still, that's another use of our resources that is like, really? That's how we want to use our resources now, while we have climate catastrophe going on, while it's just,
Well, the whole idea of the Space Force is just talk about things that I don't know how you're justifying money for. Like,
right. It's pretty spaced out to me, Space Force.
Yeah.
Sounds like I'll rather watch the Jetsons myself. I'll just watch the Jetsons and call it a day. But anyway.
Yeah.
Well, so how people can get more involved? Well, first of all, this is, Buff State, WBNY, that is our host for this show, as well as Think Twice Radio, that is also producing the show. But WBNY, of course, is Buff State Radio, Buff State's radio station. And so I hope that students who are listening are interested in starting a new chapter. There was a Buff State Students for Peace chapter. I went with them to one of the 5-year reviews of the nuclear deal, the nuclear treaty.
The NPT?
Right. Yep. The NPT. The NPT, when we had June San walking through, we'd done the walk, and then ended up in we went on different parts. I know I went different days. People went when they could. And then met all in New York City for that NPT review. And that was in 2010, I believe. And I think we might have done the same in 2015. But anyway, one of those years I went with the Buff State Students for Peace. And they could be started up again, Buff State Students for Peace, or a Western New York Peace chapter, or a PANYS chapter, whatever students want to call it, to have your own chapter. And it's actually a job for students as well, right? A part-time job for a student organizer. I know that is another thing.
Yes, it's not paid hourly. There is a stipend at the end of the semester, though. And it's also just a really wonderful chance to be involved in a student network with students across the state who care about the same issues that you do, that are also learning. We have monthly student network-wide conference calls. Pre-pandemic, we'd have an in-person student peace conference. Right now, we're going to have some very safe, socially discussions.
Right.
But, we do skill building. We have really wonderful partners on all the different issues we work on. We only got to talk about a couple today, but there are many more.
Right, there are.
So it's a really great chance to connect and be part of a community of other students that are learning and growing in their activism around these issues.
It's a wonderful opportunity to help each other and ourselves. And it is fun, too. It feels good to work on something you believe in, to do something, it's always the right time to do the right thing. And also it's good, you meet people you can, it can be the beginning of a career, even as for some people, it has been, right? In doing that work.
Yes.
Or at least, or for a lifelong passion in doing that work, and all kinds of skills or connections that get made while you're doing it. So It's really great having you on the show. I know I've been trying to get you on the show for quite a while. I hope I haven't bugged you too much. But finally,
No.
it's so good to have you. I think it's, I did want to make a mention of the annual meeting. So that's going to be on September 20th, right? So people can find that
Yes.
on the Western New York Peace Center website at WNYPC.org. With the link, or as well on PANYS.org, right? So,
Yes. We also have our C3 organization, the PeaceAction Fund of New York State, has their annual fundraiser coming up on October 4th. That one is also virtual. You can find more information on our website. Again, that's PANYS.org. But this year's theme is Athletes in Activism. It's our annual William Sloan Coffin Gala. So this year we'll be honoring athletes that have really taken a stand for their activism, specifically Eton Thomas, who I think is originally from Syracuse, and then Renee Montgomery, who is part of the Atlanta Dreams. We'll both be accepting awards. We always honor a student chapter every year, so we'll be doing that. And that will be at 6 p.m. Eastern on October 4th. And you can go to our website for more information on that event, or if you just want to donate to us or get further involved, you can also follow us on social media. I think we have Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And for all of those, it's at PeaceAction NY. We don't have a TikTok yet, but we're on the other social media sites if you want to follow us.
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited about all of that, and that sounds like a really great event. Well, both of them will be, I know, and very exciting all round, and lots of good work going on. So I am so grateful to you, Emily, for all your wonderful work and leadership and skills and compassion, Vicki, and all of that. And we are getting there. So I do thank you so much for coming on the show, and so we've been talking peace, and so we've been talking peace in truth and love. Thank you so very much. It's really great to have you on the show. So, and I will be definitely at the, ready for the annual meeting, and I'll try and sneak in. I'm not sure if I can. We'll see how it's going at the, on Wednesday, tomorrow.
Tomorrow's Wednesday already.
Yes.
But yes, no worries. I don't think we have a lot of prep left to do. So
right, no.
I don't think we have a lot. So.
Actually, I was thinking that one of the things that you were talking about that we could have, one of the additional jobs could have been a job for the at-large people who were suggesting it. Maybe I thought of that too. But anyway, we'll all share in the work because there's a ton of it. But, we'll keep making progress. A ton of it. Yeah, but we're getting there. We are getting there. Well, I'm so grateful to you, Emily. So I can hardly wait to see you.
I'm grateful to you, Vicki.
Yeah, when we get to see you, that'll be good. Okay. Virtually or actually in person, even sometime.
I'll make my way up.
Yep. Okay, well, you take care. Thanks again. Thanks a jillion for coming on.
You too. Thanks, Vicki.
Thanks.
Yes. Bye.
Bye. Bye for now.
Bye.
See you. Freezing up. It was freezing up a fair little bit. She was able to navigate.
I was thinking why that was.
I was
She's in
thinking
New York
that.
City, right?
Yeah.
Hurricane Ida. Their infrastructure was damaged.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So they're probably using backup satellite dishes and stuff like that.
Right. I wondered why it was because I was thinking, well, she won't have that problem because she makes sure that she has a good, I mean, she does enough ever, and they're working remotely now, and she's the executive director, so I figured she would have to have a pretty good setup. What I didn't figure on is what you just said. I never saw